I think that's working now. And so welcome this morning to Lead with Aloha Facebook group. If you're watching this video, you are here inside of our group. And before we get started, if you know anyone who is in a leadership role and is kind of having issues with their team, they need to hear this broadcast. So go ahead and invite people that you know might be struggling with their team, and this is why. So I had a few things I wanted to talk about today. Well, as like I prepared for this yesterday, and then I also wasn't really able to sleep last night. God was just kind of, it was one of those things where there's something on your heart and you want to share, you want to, say things, but then it's like unprocessed, and I'm that person that needs to finish like a movie or a story or whatever. Like I need to know the ending. That's just the kind of person that I am. So last night I wasn't able to sleep until I finished my notes for this broadcast. And yesterday I was reading Psalms 32, and it is the part where, well, if you're not familiar with the Bible at all, or if this is not like Christianity or the Bible's not your thing, just know this is where I get all of my revelation from. It's from spending time with the Lord here in this chair, and I usually do it from my desk, but I felt like there was more mana. Mana is like power, and that's why I named this Facebook group Lead with Aloha, because I'm going to be sharing with you some insights that I'm going to be bringing to the table around the Hawaiian culture and sustainability as a culture in Hawaii, and how that applies to leadership and resilient leadership. Okay, so anyway, I'll be throwing all of that to say I will be throwing Hawaiian words in this group here and there, just so just so you're aware. And I really love this brand shift where I get to bring all of myself to you and to my business. And this is just going to be a sidebar real quick. We need to bring all of ourselves into our leadership as well. A little story is, the whole premise of this movement, the fierce female movement, and also like how that applies to leadership. If you've not been on a Zoom call with me, the backstory is my friend Sheila. She is a business strategist, and she and I are gonna, we're talking about doing collaborations and going into the corporate space and helping them set up their business vision. She's the business visionary, and I'm the operations person. I've been in operations for 19 years, and we had like a little like brainstorming session, and I was like, I had this idea about Aloha and my brand name, which is Aloha Unveiled. If you follow me on Instagram, it is Aloha Unveiled. Not a plug, but just letting you know the whole backstory of why the group was changed to Lead with Aloha. And I couldn't figure out like why God was putting all of these things on my heart, and why I wanted to teach leadership. And so some of you are already part of like Shanda Sumter's Hardcore Leadership Program, and I've never taken it, but what I know is like in corporate there were so many like leadership trainings that managers we had to go through as part of our ongoing I guess like it would be like what was it called? Continuing education. not credits, but it was mandatory. Like we had to attend these leadership classes. Anyway, I'm going to be teaching from that today, but also combining it with Psalms 32 and King David, who, right, he wrote a lot of the Old Testament, like the Psalms and everything. There's so much wisdom in the Psalms. And then Proverbs was written by his son. So Psalms 32 actually, I consider it to be a change and a shift in David's destiny, and also bringing forth Solomon, his son, who was the greatest leader and or the wisest man that ever lived, and therefore like the greatest leader of his time. Okay. And right now, like in Psalms 32, it is a pivotal moment in David's life. So a little backstory on David, if you're not familiar. David and Goliath, you probably heard of that story. And then David eventually became king. And when he was king, so back in the day, like being married to multiple wives was acceptable. Right now, it's all about monogamy and things like that. But he had multiple wives, and as a king, but I guess they didn't have weddings. They just had like consummation that happened, and that's how you became like a wife of the king. Or I don't know if there's concubines. I think because Solomon had concubines. Anyway, I digress. So this right before. A year before Psalms 32 was written, David was it was a wartime. So David was supposed to be at war, and then he didn't end up going to war, and he was out on his balcony one day. It's kind of like quarantine, right? He's out on his balcony, and then he looked across, and he saw this woman bathing on a rooftop. And I don't know, like where they're supposed to bathe. I didn't get that deep into biblical history and stuff. I just study it for fun, just because I want to know like biblical, like the background of scripture and what it means and what it meant for the people at that time. Culturally things were different, phrases that were said were different, or it means different things. And I guess because I don't speak fluently, but I learned Japanese and Hawaiian language, right? So different phrases in English don't always translate out to Hawaiian and vice versa. There's a lot of like Hawaiian phrases that don't translate over well to English. Because words like aloha mean multiple things. And, they mean multiple things. And, yeah. Sorry, when I get... I always forget to turn off my notifications because it kind of throws me off. And so... Anyway, that's why I kind of like do all the research. So anyway, Bathsheba was taking a bath on her rooftop. I don't know if that was risque or not risque, but she was doing that. David saw her, started lusting after her, and called his people to bring her over to the palace. Hi, I don't know who you are. If you could comment, let me know who's watching because I can't see it. So he brought Bathsheba over to his house. They had a thing, and then she went home. But she was married at the time. Her husband was away at war, and so she ended up getting pregnant by David at this time. And she was pregnant, and so at this time, that's when like Bathsheba came, and in Psalms 32. Or this whole thing with like David's sin, because this is what happened, right? So he sent her away. Like they had their little thing, and then he kind of sent her away quietly, and it's like on the down low, right? Then she comes back and says, "I'm pregnant." And what he does is he calls for her husband. Her husband's name is Uriah. So he sends Uriah to the front line so that he'll be killed. And then right once Uriah is dead, then now she can become David's wife, right? And then it'll be happily ever after. Like nobody will know. And you know what kind of a leader kills off his own man? You know, and so this is Psalms 32 is right after Nathan confronts David about his sin, and you know, Nathan delivers a prophecy, and he was like, hey, so there's this guy that he's speaking hypothetically now, right? He's like, there's this guy who, you know, has a lamb, and you know, he loves this lamb. He hand fed it. He was raising it, you know, to be like because back then they raised lambs for sacrifice, right? He was like, yeah, hand fed, slept in his bed, like really took care of the lamb as a pet, right? And then he's like, okay, so there's this man with the sheep, and then there's another man who has tons of sheep, and comes to the first man and was like, hey dude, give me your sheep, like I just want it, it's a prize sheep and I want it to be part of you know, my stuff. And this is the one sheep that this man had, the first man had, and then this greedy guy was like, hey, give me your sheep, I want your sheep, and kind of brings it over right into, and so now this guy he's sad and he's lonely and he's like, you know, he's distraught. And so David immediately jumps and is like, that man should be punished. We should, like, and he was just laying out, like, we should do this and this and this and this. Because it wasn't, I don't think Nathan was saying it was I don't know, I forget if it was hypothetical, but like David was like, you need to do X, Y, Z discipline on this guy. And you know, he needs to be punished to the full letter of the law. Like, that's just like, there's no excuse for that. And then Nathan goes, you, David, are that man, right? And so he was confronted with his sin and whatever. So Psalms 32 is talking about what David did when we are confronted as leaders, right? So he could have been just like, hey, you know, like, I don't care, like, I did this sin, like, it's okay for me, like, I'm the leader of this country, right? I can do whatever I want because I am the leader, and just kind of ignore the stuff, this thing that was brought to his attention. But no, what does he do? He totally goes and repents, and he goes before God, and he's just like, wow, I'm so sorry. And so because of that, you know, that's where, you know, he repented and he changed the trajectory of like God's discipline, and pretty much like how he shifted. Like it could have really gone bad, but you know, David is known as the man after God's own heart, and being a man after God's heart, you know, David clearly was very repentant, like when he was confronted. Anyway, so I want to talk about all of that to say, I'm just gonna talk about how, you know, what do we do when we are confronted as a leader, and when things are brought to our attention, things that we don't like, things that, you know, just need to be corrected in our organization, or things that are under our jurisdiction, and what do we do? And so, so there are 3 points that I'm going to talk about today. Like, what do we not do when we're confronted, right? Number 1 is we should not belittle our people. So in the case of David and Nathan, right? He could have just went to Nathan like, you're stupid, you don't know what you're talking about. But Nathan was a prophet, right? He hears directly from the Lord. And so Nathan heard from the Lord, did what he's supposed to do, confronted his leader, And if David had turned around and said, you don't know what you're talking about, like, I'm the leader, you don't know anything, so we're just gonna keep continuing and moving on, right? And there were times when I worked for a very masculine energy corporation, right? Oil refining. So very masculine energy, very, I don't know if you're familiar with the term old boy network. And it was just do as I say, and just, like the leader was pretty much had all the authority. And so, when bringing, so when people come to you with suggestions or improvements, or there's things happening in your organization that, or not even, say you're a business owner, right? And you're a coach and you have like a group coaching program or a mastermind. If people come to you inside of your group and are like, hey, yes, there's like complainers and stuff, but then there's other times where it's legit. And if more than one person is bringing up this issue with your business or your team, I mean, 3 people can't be wrong. So we should really take into consideration their thoughts and their feelings, because one, how hard is it to confront leadership? I mean, I know some people are just jerks and they just speak out against leadership just because they want to be heard and they want to be valued, and they feel like they're not getting it. They have like this dark hole where they feel like they just have to spew out negativity. We're not talking about those people. We're talking about people who come to you as a leader, want to make changes, want to improve the system. Right? We have to take these people. We have to address their concern and lead with love, right? Lovingly accept their suggestions, even if it's criticism, whatever. When people come to us, it's because they're experiencing issues, and to put it like very generally, their love tank is feeling empty. Not that you're responsible for filling up their love tank, but at work, they're not feeling loved. And that's like the number one cause of attrition, is a boss not listening. And if you have good people, right? I left an entrepreneurial organization because I wasn't seen and heard. I was trying to voice my opinion. Like, this is why they hired me. They hired me to organize their systems and their operational stuff and create SOPs and all of that. And when I brought my suggestions, they were ignored. And I was like, I was like, okay, I'm not being a jerk. I'm not trying to come at you like, do this or whatever. It really took a lot for me to step out of my comfort zone and have this conversation, because I know that the person in charge had built the system from the ground up. Right? She built the system from the ground up, and it was working for this level. They had a small core team, and we were onboarding new team members to just take the load off of these people who have been carrying the whole company pretty much for the majority of the growth period. Now they wanted to expand and scale, right? You have to onboard more team members when you're in the process of scaling. And my suggestions were ignored and not accepted. I'm like, it's fine. And then I eventually ended up leaving because the job that I was hired to do, which was to organize the business in the back end, I wasn't able to do my job because the leadership wasn't listening to the suggestions that I had. And it's like, if I'm not fulfilling my purpose here, not me and my purpose, but my purpose for your organization, if I'm not fulfilling that, then honestly, I felt bad for them paying me to do stuff that wasn't my job. And entrepreneurship is very different from corporate, so I get that. But I'm like, it's not working for you, it's not working for me. I kind of keep spinning my wheels. It's not worth it for you to pay me to create systems that you're not going to implement. So I just ended up leaving. So that was number one. Wow. Shucks, I have another call in 7 minutes. Why don't I just break this up? I'll do another. Maybe I'll do a 3-part series. I'll do the rest of them this week. But the other two is, so number 2 is get to know your people. Just really get to know where they are and their heart. So it kind of ties into what I was saying about this person that I was working for. Like, she knew me, but she didn't really know everything that I was capable of and why and all of that. And I kind of covered it earlier. Number 3 is just having humility when you are wrong. Wrong is such a charged phrase. You know what? I'm just gonna finish it. Number 2, getting to know your people. When you are growing and scaling and you're onboarding new team members, the person that hired me in the example that I gave before, she already knew me, knew my business, because I had worked with her inside of this coaching program, so she already knew what my business was. But then she didn't know how my operation stuff, because I was in the coaching program, I was building up my business, my coaching business, not necessarily my operations skills. Does that make sense? And so she didn't understand like the level of operations background that I had in corporate, and she saw me as the person who was just like a life coach, just trying to make it, just trying to hustle. I mean, they did hire me on as an operations specialist because of the organization that I worked for. Is a very big organization, and they wanted to get more corporate structure in their business. But they couldn't see the vision that I had, and so just an example of what I wanted to talk about is when I used to work for the refinery. We had I was a new hire trainer, so I would onboard all of the new people, like get them. I did all their training, like their 8-week boot camp style training. People come in not knowing how to make gasoline, and by the time they leave the 8-week training, they know pretty much how a refinery works, how all the parts work, and then they go into their individualized plant training where they learn how their own processes work. So there's all different processes in the different parts of the refinery. When they come to me, I teach them refinery basics. Anyhow, we had an orientation week, like a whole week of orientation and onboarding. All the different managers from each department would come. These are the managers now, right? They are busy. They are busy running their parts of the company, but they come and they do an orientation meeting, like a 1-hour orientation. They have slides. These are slides that they just reuse over and over with each class, but still, they have these slides, and they go through the slides, and then they open it at the end. Any questions? Like, really, no question is left unanswered. If they don't have the answer, then they refer you to who might have the answer. And usually the person who has the answer is coming that week, and then I would just take notes, and when the other person would come, or I would email them or whatever. Just, they needed to have their questions answered, and also they needed to be seen, right? They needed to be acknowledged, right? When you onboard a new person to your business, especially if you're working with overseas VAs, right? You need to have some kind of onboarding process where each member of your team is seen and heard, and they know that their voice is valued, right? So these leaders in the organization did their spiel, like this is the part that I do in the refinery and how it relates to the industry as a whole. And then they also said, if you have any questions, I'm here to answer them. If any questions come up later on, like anytime in your career, just know my door is always open. And we really had an open door policy. Like, unless, like, we would only close doors if there, we had conference calls. Other than that, you could just walk into anybody's office and be like, hey, I had a question about this. And if they have time, they'll help you. Or if they're in their office, that means they have time. If they're not in their office, they are in a conference room having a meeting. That's just how our culture was built. So not like you have to do that, but I'll just say, as a new hire trainer, it made it that much easier for the people that I was training, made it less scary for them. Because refineries are big, they're kind of scary, it's petroleum, and especially like after the Gulf thing happened, right? The whole Gulf fire, and like you're dealing with very volatile product. So hey, thanks for watching. And let's see, so that is for, let's do a recap since Nancy, you're here. When people come to you, don't belittle them. Like if they come to you with suggestions or improvements for your business or your organization, don't belittle them, and just really listen to them. Also, like getting to know your people, taking time to know who they are and what their strengths are, and really have them work within their strengths. And number 3, I cannot get to number 3. I have to hop off and get to my next call. So we'll talk about number 3 tomorrow. Number 3 is humility. How to really handle things when it's easy to say like, yeah, when it comes, you should just hear and listen and things. But when someone is really challenging you as a leader, how to be humble and speak to them in humility so that you can diffuse any conflict. So tomorrow we're going to talk about humility and conflict resolution, number 3 for this live. So if you're watching this now, between steps 1 and 2, let me know which one you feel like you're good at or you need to work on, just wins. No, like not wins. So just let me know in the comments which one resonated to you, and if you have to work on it, or if you're like bomb at it and you're like, yes, this is my strength, I'm really good at it. Because I want to start connecting all of you in here. Like if you're good at something, then you should just own it, right? It's about us owning our worth and letting other people know that we have value. So love you guys. I'll see you guys tomorrow talking about humility and leadership. Thanks. Bye.